President, what do you do?
Well, a lot of things, say the least. A lot of what I do is acquire Bentonnite properties. I oversee the mining, a lot of the equipment, the manpower, the order in which various properties are mined, the sequences of it, and the priorities of it. I decide what the priorities are, and that carries over onto the reclamation as well.
Okay. Let's just go right to the question that Mr. Lawson left for you, and that is, what is the time frame for mining? And I don't know that we need to address the entire Herco amendment, but the TTT-10, first of all, why does it have a date, a limitation date of what, May 1, 2020? Where does that come from?
That comes from Mr. Crossenhammer, his son, either one.
Okay. Let's go back in time a little bit. Who staked that claim on the TTT-10?
I became aware of that area being federal minerals, and I suggested to Mr. Crossenham that I filed a claim in his name. I've done that for many different ranchers that we have dealt with. They've owned the surface. Why I've asked them if they wanted to be the claim owner, and that paid them royalties. And with respect to Mr. Crossenham, he was, of course, fine with our filing on the claim. However, later he took the claim and put it in his name. But at the same time, we had an agreement, and I agreed to purchase the Bentonnite for $75,000 paid over 5 years.
And I believe we've introduced that into evidence, that exhibit. Is that? I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to look over here and see. Do you see it here? Do you see the assignment here? Here we go. Exhibit 27. Is that the contract with?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Who did you deal with before you signed that contract?
Mr. Crossenham.
Okay. And what is the date of the contract?
Let's see, what is it? It's the 12th of July, 2013.
So this is back in 2013 that you and Mr. Crossenham, you agreed to mine his claims. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. And then when did you agree to be off of that property?
There was no agreement to be off of it at the time. That came later.
Isn't it in this agreement? Doesn't it give you a date in there?
Oh, it does. Okay. Yeah, you're right.
And what is the date?
April 20th, 2020.
April 20th?
April 30th, excuse me.
April 30, 2020?
Yeah.
Okay. And that relates to the TTT-10 claim?
It does, yes, sir.
Okay. Are you limited on the Herco minerals or the Bobcat 10? Do you have a time limitation on those?
No, we do not.
Okay. So you dealt with this Mr. Crossenham, is that correct?
Yes.
Who actually signed the agreement?
Okay. James D. Crossenham, number 4.
And what, do you know what relation he is to Mr.
I assume he's a son or grandson, but one of the two.
Have you ever met him?
I think maybe one time, I think.
Have you ever discussed anything with him about mining the TTT?
No, no.
It's all been with Mr. Crossenham?
Yeah, and it hasn't been, we haven't had a lot of discussions about it, but yeah.
And do you know why Mr. Crossenham would deny you Black Hills Bentonnite access to that claim?
No.
Have you paid tell me about the terms of payment.
Terms of payment were $15,000 starting in 2013 and ending in 2017. $15,000 each year.
And have you made those payments?
Yes.
I'm going to hand you Exhibit 28 if you can take a look at that. And tell me what that is.
These are checks made out to the Triple T Ranch for the sum of $15,000 in those respective years.
Okay. For a total of what?
$75,000.
Okay. So you've paid Mr. Crossingham. Who are the checks made out to?
Triple T Ranch Company.
And so and is it your understanding that Mr. Crossingham is the president of Triple T?
It's my understanding.
Okay. And how about his grandson? Do you know if his grandson owns an interest in the Triple T Ranch?
No, I don't know that. I don't know that.
Okay. So you've paid him $75,000, but he's denied you access. Do you know why?
Oh, object to the following question. There's no evidence of any denial of access.
He's refused to sign Form 8. Has he told you why?
No.
When Mr. Gibson sent him the mine and reclamation plan, did you hear anything back from Mr. Crossingham?
We never had any reply other than we've had some correspondence where we've attempted to solve this whole issue, but we've been met with some what we would consider untenable offers, if you would, for a settlement of any kind.
I'd offer evidence Exhibit 28. Was it the checks? Yeah.
I have no objection.
We also heard a little discussion about your attempts to discuss the Herc Amendment with Mr. Crossingham. Can you tell us about those conversations?
Well,
Hold on. I object on relevancy. I don't see how any of the discussions have anything to do with these four factors that this council is supposed to be considering.
You opened this up by asking the last witness if they had any negotiations.
I didn't ask that to Mr. Lawson.
I asked that. I didn't ask the negotiation, just like something to talk.
Right. Well, there was the recital of the
Okay.
deposition. I'll let this go a little bit, but it is starting to get off.
Well, he did cross-examine Mr. Lawson and tell Mr. Lawson that he,
Right, that's why I'm allowed.
Yeah. First of all, let's talk about the airplane conversation briefly, and then I think.
well, prior to that airplane conversation, if I may, I met with Mr. Crossingham and Mr. McGuire out at his ranch with.
Who is Mr. McGuire?
That's the ranch foreman, ranch manager, whatever, with Bob Perry, and we spent probably an hour and a half or more at the ranch. I think maybe another first half hour was probably politics, and next hour or so was discussing in general terms, and then Mr. Crossingham wanted to go out to the property, and we went out and drove around, and really there wasn't anything was really decided at that point at all, other than we viewed the area. And then, as Mr. Lawson had spoken, that I met Jim at the airport on about the 29th or thereabouts of August. Spent some time at the airport, also on the airplane, and Jim and I had a very congenial conversation. Jim really wasn't interested, in my opinion, in discussing the matter, even though I was more than happy to. And I made an attempt or two to at least bring up the subject, but it was never, I could see that he really didn't care about, talking about it, so I let it go.
You've heard the discussions here about access and some objections to access. Has Mr. Crossingham ever told you that he doesn't believe you have access to the Herco mineral?
No,
Has he ever objected to interference with surface operations?
no,
Ever told you that you'd harmed cattle or injured cattle?
no,
Has he said anything to you about your operations, about concerns for operations?
not that I can think of.
Has he raised issues about dust?
We've been, aware of dust, and we've watered the roads on a number of occasions.
And there's been some objection to access from the north. How long has, and specifically the Wall Creek Road, is that it? Wall Creek?
Yes.
When's the first time that you heard an objection about Black Hills using Wall Creek Road?
I guess within the last week.
How long has Black Hills been using Wall Creek Road?
We started using it originally in about 1970. We had filed some claims on, I assume that this was before there was any landowner consent, et cetera. So we had filed mining claims, and we mined near the top of Tisdale Mountain. And we did that for 3 or 4 years. And then in 1975, we began what we call the Butts lease. And that land was later acquired by Mr. Crossingham.
And is that lease still active?
Yes.
Is that the one directly north of Herco?
That's on either side of the Herco Amendment, yes.
I think I'm close. Can I just confer with my client a moment and see? Is there anything else that?
Mr. Deva?
We can hear you.
And it's probably not critical because. Have you ever seen any no trespassing signs on the Wall Creek Road or any of the roads?
No.
That's all I have.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Carson.
Hi.
How are you?
Really well, thank you.
Okay. Well, I'd like to go back and ask you a few questions, specifically about the Herco Amendment area. Isn't it true that the 347 acres that were part of the Herco Amendment, or that are part of the Herco Amendment area, that same acreage was presented as part of what's called the Snyder Ranch Amendment?
Yes, I think it was.
Okay, so previously, what was known as the Snyder Ranch Amendment encompassed essentially about 500 acres, of which 347 were part of the Herco Amendment, true?
Yes.
Okay. And Black Hills Bentonnite made the decision at what point to separate the acreage in the Herco Amendment from the Snyder Ranch Amendment.
We made that decision, it was probably a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, something like that.
Right. So it was about a year ago that Black Hills had decided to separate these two amendments into separate amendments, correct?
Yes.
But previously, you had been in negotiations with Mr. Crossingham in regards to one joint amendment of which he agreed that you could have his consent in exchange for you agreeing to quit claim back to him your mining rights in all of those areas after May 1st of 2020. Isn't that true?
That's true.
Okay. So he was willing to give the consent as long as you agreed you were going to be out of both the Snyder Ranch Amendment area and the Herco Amendment area by May 1st of 2020.
Yeah, but he wanted all of my claims, and all of the DeButt's claims.
Okay. The reason he wanted that is because he had discussed with you his frustration of these claims out on his lands being left open for many, many years. Isn't that what really the discussions were?
That might have been his motivation.
Okay. But that was certainly what he expressed to you, is the reason why he wanted this to have a termination date is so that he would know that at May 1st of 2020, you guys were going to be done and you were going to be out of there. You were going to remove everything and have it reclamated.
There may have been other reserves on those claims that we have not gone and mined at this point. So I wasn't willing to give up a whole series of claims for that argument.
And so Black Hills' strategy is that even with respect to claims that they have where they're seeking an amendment, they may go back later, even after they've finished with this amendment, and on the same lands, try and mine some more, right?
It's not impossible, not likely, but not impossible.
And you can understand why it would be important for a surface landowner to want to know, how long are these companies going to be out here mining on my lands?
Well, we have the right to be there, number one. And we have the right to be there as long as we want to be there.
You have the mineral rights, correct?
Yes.
But you have to also take into consideration what are the surface owner's rights, and that's why you have to essentially seek the consent of the owner before you submit your mine application, right?
Say that again.
Okay, Black Hills Bentonnite, let's just talk about the Herco Amendment area. I don't think there's no dispute that Black Hills Bentonnite has the right to mine for Bentonnite in all of the acreage within the Herco Amendment area, correct?
Yes.
And likewise, would you agree that TTT Ranch Company is the surface owner of all of the lands that are encompassed in the Herco Amendment area?
Yes.
And as part of the requirements under our state statutes, before you can go in and get a mine permit, you have to try and get the surface owner's consent.
Yes.
And in doing so, you have to present enough information, enough detailed information to the surface owner to allow them to make an informed decision about whether they are going to give consent or withhold their consent, correct?
Yes.
All right. And so when we're talking about previously the combination of these two amendment areas, the Snyder Ranch and the Herco Amendment area, the discussions were always and have always been at the forefront a termination date by which Black Hills would be out of there. That has always been part of the negotiations between TTT Ranch and Black Hills, correct?
Well, we would like to be out of there too. We're not trying to stay in there any longer than we have to.
Well, you would agree with me.
But I don't want to give up the right arbitrarily.
Okay. Historically, your mining practices on the 3T Ranch, that they've been going on since the 70s and continue to this day, even on mine permits that you obtained years and years and years ago, right?
Yes.
Okay. And those areas have not been reclaimed.
They have also been reclaimed. Everything's been reclaimed that we touched in there.
This goes directly to the course of practice, the course of conduct, and whether or not their current mine plan has, by their own conduct, evidence that they are not going to be able to complete and do what they're claiming that they're going to do. So I believe it's relevant.
Go for another minute, but we've already addressed a lot of this.
So, Mr. Thorson, with respect to the Wall Creek road. That is a private road, true?
To my knowledge, it is.
Okay. And Black Hills Bentonnite does not have a surface or a road agreement or road easement to use the Wall Creek Road from the northern part of the Herco Amendment all the way through the TT Ranch until you connect up with either Interstate 25 or the old highway, true?
It's been a history. We do not have an agreement. We've used it historically for over nearly 50 years.
Okay. But there is no agreement in place.
There's no written agreement in place.
Okay. In 2017, did you negotiate a surface easement or a road easement, I should say, with Emmerich Huber and Mike Tobin?
I will object to this, Madam Chair. Again, we're getting off to some other access that Mr. Lawson testified, does not provide complete access.
I will let this go for a couple of questions, but again, this has been addressed.
Did you in fact negotiate?
Oh, I did.
Okay.
And let me just explain in a minute why. That road will access additional reserves further south going that way. That way, I would not have to go through the 3T Ranch to access the additional reserves.
And you could access the Herco Amendment area by coming from the south up towards that area.
I could.
Thank you. And that would be a much shorter route and less intrusive onto the surface estate of the TTT Ranch if you came up through the south on the Tisdale Mountain Road than coming through from the north. True?
That's true. We don't, go ahead.
Okay.
Let me make this remark also. That road is not, that's a very limited time. We have a 6-month time frame on that road. It goes over the top of Tisdale Mountain. It's not a road that it's not an all-weather situation for sure.
Well, and the Wall Creek Road is not an all-weather road either.
It's not all-weather, but there's no grades to go up, and it's a different situation.
It's essentially a dirt road, the Wall Creek Road.
It is a dirt road, sure it is.
You discussed the fact that there is an assignment for the TTT number 10, correct?
Yes,
And that assignment is between James H. Crossingham IV and Black Hills, correct?
yes.
That's not James H. Crossingham Jr.
Doesn't make any difference.
Well, sure it does. Who did you make the payments to?
The Triple T Ranch.
Right. And the contract and the assignment is you're supposed to make those payments to who?
I suppose it's to Triple T Ranch.
The agreement was between James H. Crossingham IV and Black Hills Bentonnite, correct?
Well, I was never aware of it, whether it was Jim Crossingham or his son. I didn't know the difference.
You've confused that for years. True?
Well, they accepted checks.
And what was that for?
That was for payment for this contract.
Okay. And that contract includes the TTT number 10 and what else? The TTT number 11, right?
Which is right here.
Right. And you guys have been mining all of the TTT number 11, true?
We have a permit to mine that.
And the payment obligations under that assignment are for both the TTT number 10 and the TTT number 11, right?
Yes.
So you've been able to mine all that you want in TTT number 11, and the surface owner, the TTT Ranch Company, has given you the consent to do that.
Yes.
They've never withheld or prevented you from going out and doing your mining. Isn't that right?
They withheld their consent for about 3 years until we finally got the permit.
Mr. Buster,
Yes.
we can't rule on property.
I wanted to make clear for the council that this payment obligation is not limited to the TTT number 10, but it also involves other property for which Black Hills has been mining its bentonite.
We understand that.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Thorson, did you have any involvement in preparing the mine application for the Herco amendment?
My involvement was mainly identifying the areas that needed to be mined, should be mined, and somewhat of the sequence that it would be mined.
Okay. Did you see the mine application that was signed by the CFO of Black Hills? I'm sorry, I forgot his name, Mr. Drews. Had you seen this application before he signed it?
I don't think I did.
Okay. Similar question. Had you seen the reclamation plan and the mine plan that was submitted to Mr. Crossingham before it was mailed out to him?
I don't remember seeing it. We talked about it a lot. I know what the sequences are. I haven't seen the plan as it was finished.
When you say the sequences, you're referring to the mining sequences?
Yes.
Okay. And so in the mining plan, does it specifically state when the mining operations will be completed? How much time it's going to take?
My goal is to complete it by 2020, particularly on Triple T10,
Okay.
but preferably on the entire area. I'm wanting to get out of there as soon as I can.
I understand that that's your preference and your hope. But in your mining plan, did you state when it was that you would be able to complete these mining operations?
You know, Madam Chair, we've beat this to death.
I don't think he has answered this
Timeframe.
question.
What's the,
Well, asked and answered. Every witness has answered and asked that, and Mr. Thorson just answered it and says, we want to be out of there by 2020, and that's what our plan is.
I'll let Mr. Lawson answer it one time, and then
Mr. Thorson?
Thorson, I'm sorry.
I may have said Lawson too.
Thank you. Okay, so do you need me to repeat the question?
Go ahead.
Okay. In the mining plan that you submitted to TTT Ranch, did you identify the amount of time it would take to complete the mining of the Herco amendments?
I'm not sure we identified it. This time keeps getting compressed because the 2020 is a definite date, but we have not been given the permit to mine at this point. So that keeps getting to be a shorter and shorter time that we have to complete the mining. Now, if we'd been given the permits a year or two ago, it would have been very simple. The longer this goes on, the more complicated it becomes to meet that timeline.
Maybe I'm not communicating my question very clearly. I'm not talking about when it will be completed as far as a date certain. I want to know, in your experience, sir, in mining, given the amount of mining that is proposed for the Herco Amendment area, how long would it take to complete that mining?
It could be done in a year and done. I can still do it. If I had the permit today, I could be done by 2020, April 20th.
So your testimony is it would take 1 year to complete the mining.
And hauling and reclamation. No, yeah, 1 year, depending on when I start, because we're talking about field drying, we're talking about seasons. I really need to get started soon.
Okay. In the mine plan, then, did you identify that these operations, the mining operations, the hauling operations, and the reclamation could be done within 1 year?
I don't know that we did identify that could be done within 1 year.
Why not?
Well,
Objection, Madam Chair. I just, again, he's beat this to death.
Well, every other witness has pointed to Mr.
Thorson
as the expert on this, so I think we need to hear his answer.
well, I'll get it done as quickly as I can. Like I said, if I'm compressed into 1 year, then it's very difficult. I may have to take the bentonite and actually move it onto our adjacent areas just because I can't get it dried. But I'm trying to get out of there by 2020.
based upon the mine plan that was put together in this, for this particular matter, the Herco Amendment area, does any of the mining affect any of the drainages through that area?
No,
You're saying that neither the Hotwater Creek, the Million Creek, or the Thomas Creek are in any way affected by your mining operations?
no, they're not.
Okay, how did you determine that?
Because we stay, as Mr. Gibson has stated, we stayed about 30 feet away from the top of the drainage. And so we're very careful about protecting drainages.
If this hydrology map shows, and you overlay it and look at it in comparison to where these mining operations are going to occur, if you look through here, you can see that there are drainages that would come through those mining areas.
Well, I know there are, sure there is.
Okay. But what efforts did you put into this plan to establish how you were going to protect those drainages?
Well, the mining,
I guess I'll object to this. It's been asked and answered. Mr. Gibson testified that he went out, he did the GPS work on that, and again, Mr. Thorson just answered it as well.
We should move on.
Who made the decision to include in the mine application that the dates for mining would be from November 2017 through 2022?
apparently Bruce or Doug Gibson. I didn't do that.
With respect to this mine plan, was there any inclusion in that plan in regards to protecting any of the cattle or cow-calf pairs that are run on this particular location?
I guess I'm going to object to this. He said that he did not prepare the plan. Mr. Lawson and Mr. Gibson prepared it, and he's, you know, he had them on the stand, asked them the same questions.
Mr. Thorson is the president of the company. I'll let him answer this, but.
You mean, is there a plan? I'm not sure what the point of the question is.
In your mine plan, is there any inclusion or statements that contain how Black Hills Bentonnite is going to protect or prevent any sort of harm or issues with regards to the cattle that are being grazed on the TTT ranch?
I'm not aware of anything specifically in the mine plan.
Okay. And there's no mention and there's nothing in this mine plan in regards to when you have a mine pit that you fence out to prevent cattle or any other livestock from being injured, correct?
That's correct.
And in fact, in the past, you have had livestock or cattle that has been injured or killed in pits that are located on the TTT ranch, true?
In another area, I think there might have been one.
Okay. And so that was another area that you failed to address with the landowner, how you were going to protect the livestock that are being run out on those surface lands.
Yes, we fenced that area.
Well, you didn't, there's nothing in this plan that says you're going to fence in that area.
That's true.
Also, are you aware of the fact that the public access this area through routes that Black Hills Bentonnite uses with its haul truck?
I'm not aware that they are, but they may very well.
Okay. Is Black Hills Bentonnite doing anything to prevent or keep out the public from traveling on these private roads?
We have not.
Okay. You haven't put in any gates, correct?
We have gates, but they're open.
Right. You leave them open, which would allow the public to enter these areas, right?
Right.
And that's been a problem.
I don't know if it's been a problem. Don't know that.
Well, have your third-party contractors, the trucking companies that haul, have they been told to go out and close these gates to prevent the public or others from coming onto these private lands?
There haven't been any gates to close.
Foster, and this is a matter that we can enforce.
This goes to, once again, the surface disruptions and the problems associated with their use or their proposed use.
Well, yeah. So mining's been going on in that area for 50 years, 30 years. So the activity that's going to occur on this section will not be significantly different than the activities that have been experienced by the landowners for the last 30 years. Is that a fair statement on my part?
Well, I don't know, because the plan is so deficient with what the full scope of this proposed amendment is. We don't know.
But as I understand it, the plan will be reviewed by the DEQ on it, and deficiencies noted at that time, and then up public notice via the comments.
Well, that's true.
There's another avenue. I got my long-winded there, but it feels to me like there's a more appropriate other avenue for you to deal with that, and maybe it's not yet ready to be dealt with.
Well, and I think this is an issue that once again goes back to the factors that this council can consider in determining whether to give an order in lieu of, and that is what are the types of damages or interferences that are going to be suffered by the landowner as a result of these proposed operations. And the best way to show that is to say what has happened in the past, how have these been how have they been dealt with in the past, and are they likely to occur in the future? It's difficult to, it's different than, for instance, I know other issues before the EQC involving whether somebody's going to come in and put in a new mine and they've never had any, there's been no disturbances that have yet occurred. That's entirely different than what we have here, where we have years and years of experience. And that's why I believe these questions are relevant to establish whether or not consent should be given.
Mr. Austin, there's no avenue to call the sheriff and say they're trespassing. So it's, enforcing trespassing law. So this isn't something that we can address in this case.
And I'm not asking this EQC to enforce or provide some trespassing or get a sheriff to remove somebody. I'm simply pointing out that these are all part of the harms or the damages that are suffered to a surface owner.
We understand what you're trying to point out.
Okay. Mr. Thorson, as part of the mine plan, did you make any determination of the total amount of bentonite that would be mined from the Herco Amendment area?
Herco Amendment has more or less 60,000 tons.
Okay. And how long does it take to remove 60,000 tons?
It would take a couple months, probably 2 or 3, depending on how much effort you put into it. If need be, I mean, we haul about 40 to 50,000 tons a month into our plants.
Okay. And how many tons can one of the load trucks hold?
Oh, about 35
tons or 35,000 tons?
35 tons.
35 tons, sorry. So each truck can hold 35 tons and you're having to haul approximately, did you say 60,000 tons?
That's about how much is on that Herco amendment.
Okay. And if you're going to do all of this within a 1-year period of time, right? Like you've said before.
Yeah.
And you allow the drying process to occur, right?
The hauling probably done in the wintertime, after the drying has been done.
Okay, so how many trucks a day is that going to be going in and out of the 3T Ranch
I
every
can't
day?
tell you right off the top of my head, maybe 15, 20.
A day.
I guess I haven't done that. I haven't done the math.
Okay, and that would mean coming in, turning around, and going back out the same route out of the north, correct?
Yes.
So approximately 30 trips, 15 in, 15 out.
Probably.
And have you ever quantified what sort of dust is created as a result of that type of truck
I'm
traffic?
going to object again, Madam Chair. We beat this thing to death. We've talked about the dust. Interested in.
Find out myself. So that does go in on.
Now, this involves primarily we haul in the wintertime. That would probably be when we would do that.
Okay. But once again, have you ever tried to quantify the amount of dust that is caused by that amount of traffic?
I haven't tried to quantify it, no.
And I believe in the responses to the discovery is that you haven't done that because you're not required to.
True.
So the position of Black Hills Bentonnite is if we're not required by the state law or some statute, we don't have to do it.
Yes.
And that's the position you take with regards to dust.
Yes.
Are your mine plans and reclamation plans subject to any water quality standards?
I'd have to defer to Mr. Lawson. I'm not sure what they are.
When you mine a pit, does it sometimes get filled with water?
It has on occasion.
Okay. What do you do with that water?
It depends. Sometimes we pump it into a settling pond that's nearby. It depends on what the quality of the water is. A lot of times the water is very good quality. And then.
Isn't it true that in the past you've taken water from these pits and essentially discharged it directly into the ephemeral drainages?
If it's been good water, if it's been clear water, we have.
What quality of testing do you do to determine whether or not you can discharge into a drainage?
We've come and taken samples. I couldn't tell you what the parameters are.
If I could have one moment, Your Honor, or Madam Chairwoman, I think I'm about done. As part of this mine plan, do you know if Black Hills Bentonnite ever met with the surface landowner to determine whether or not they had a grazing pattern where they would graze their animals?
No, we have not.
Do you know how many cow-calf pairs the TTT Ranch currently runs?
Near as I know, they have about 1,000, they sell about 1,000 calves. And I guess that probably means they got another 1,000 heifers and maybe more.
Okay. And is that information you learned from the landowner?
Yeah, Mr. McGuire.
Okay. So you've asked them how many cow-calf pairs they have, but that's been the extent of your discussions
Yeah,
about
just
their operation?
Casual conversation.
Have you asked about their hunting operations on the 3T Ranch?
No, I've not.
Mr. Thorson, that's all the questions I have. Thank you.
I have a question. So, Mr. Thorson, are you currently mining on land that surface is owned currently by TTT Ranch?
Yes,
And so you've got the surface owner consent clearly to be mining on those lands.
yes.
So this has been bugging me all day. What's changed? I mean, you've been mining on their lands owned by TTT Ranch, and now you want to mine on an amendment. And yet, do you know what's changed?
I wished I did. I mean, I've been very cognizant of Mr. Cossenham. We've gone and spent a huge amount of money on silt dam at his request. We've built beautiful roads through his ranch. It gives him access to many remote pieces of his ranch. We put in concrete crossings on water courses. We've done a lot for that ranch. So it comes to me as a big surprise that this has become an issue.
So as we look at this, we've got these four things to look at. And, one of them is C, that the use does not substantially prohibit the operations of the surface owner. Do you know, are there any specific operations, surface operations in this amendment area? Are you familiar with any specific operations in this amendment area?
Other than just grazing,
So the surface owner hasn't said that there's different operations they plan to do here.
no.
And the proposed plan has to reclaim the surface to its approved future use. What's your understanding of the future use of this land?
It'll be returned to a grazing as it is today before, and when we're done, and that will be shortly.
So the surface owner hasn't told you that they've got another plan for?
No, they have not.
I'll be asking these questions again, but I just wanted to ask them to you. Thank you. No. Okay.
I think I'm okay right now. So, cross,
Redirect.
redirect, I'm sorry.
Yeah. I have just a couple of questions. Mr. Bagley asked you what had changed, and I'm going to present you with exhibit number 39, and tell me if you, what that is.
This is a letter from Margot Sabeck, dated October 10, 2014.
And who is Ms. Sabeck representing?
She represents the Triple T Ranch on the various permits that we have.
And what's the nature of that letter?
The nature of the letter basically suggesting that we should pay various sums of money for various types of mining operations, whether it's so much per acre per year, $50,000 per pit per year, $20,000 per mile of road each year. These are all on areas that we have total authority to be there, whether it's a mining lease or whatever. So I ignored this particular lease, this letter, because we own these rights. We don't have to go out and pay a separate fee to ranchers. They've already been, that was part of when these ranchers acquired this land, that was required with the knowledge that there was going to be mining, and that was part of the acceptance of when they bought the land.
Mr. Thorson, will you just go through the dollar numbers a little bit?
Okay.
I'd move for admission of Exhibit 39.
Your Honor, I would object. This is irrelevant. This is a letter from 2014. Are we here to talk about the Herco Amendment? No. This doesn't have anything to do with that Herco Amendment. We know that that didn't occur until years later. This is entirely irrelevant.
I'm gonna go ahead and admit this, and we will hear to read it this week.
So you want me to read part of it?
Well, if you can tell us what kind of dollar demands Mr. Crossingham is making.
Well, I'm not, I guess this is just Mr. Crossingham.
This is getting outside bounds as well, so.
And the reason.
I'll let it go, but not forever.
Yeah,
Something about term for 5 years, upfront payment, $75,000 for years 1 and 2, $50,000 on the second anniversary, production royalties, $1.55 per ton. Road fees, like I mentioned, $20,000 per year, $50,000 per pit.
is that, what was the $20,000 for? Was that?
Per mile per year.
Per mile per year.
It's a whole basket of
Let me show you Exhibit 40. And is Exhibit 40 your response then to that letter?
shall I read the letter?
Well,
Or
is that a letter that you asked your attorney to respond to that?
okay. I'm not sure what do you want me to do with the letter?
Is it?
We responded basically that we didn't accept any of the premise, that we had any right to entertain any of these charges because we've already acquired the rights to mine on these lands.
So, okay, let me just follow up on a couple other questions, then I'll be done here. I do, yes, 40, please.
I object. Relevancy.
So, Mr. Klosterman asked you about the Snyder Amendment, and that the Snyder Amendment enclosed the Herco Amendment initially. Why did Black Hills downsize the Snyder Amendment?
We downsized it because we had the Snyder Ranch Amendment was only one claim, and in that claim, the release that we had with Mr. Crossingham gave us the right for access to go in and mine, etc. And it did not include the Herco Amendment. It did not include the Bobcat claim. So we separated the two so we could at least get something started on the lease agreement that we had.
Okay. So when did Mr. Crossingham finally give his consent to the Snyder Amendment?
I think it was in the latter part of 2016 that we got the permit. The permit was approved, I think, in June of, I believe it was June of this year. June 2017, I think it was. I'm not positive about that.
At any rate, it was after you removed the Herco Amendment?
After we separated the two. That's true.
Mr. Klarsman asked you about whether you had contacted Mr. Crossingham, asked him about grazing rotation, other concerns that landowners might typically have. Has Mr. Crossingham ever approached you since he's owned the ranch and asked you to change the way you do things because of his surface operations?
No, there's never been any conversation in that respect.
That's all I have.
Yes. Is petitioner's exhibit 41. Do you have that? Thank you. Mr. Thorson, I'm going to hand you what's marked as petitioner's exhibit 41. That's a letter from Black Hills Bentonnite to Jim Crossingham and the Triple T Ranch dated July 14th of 2016, correct?
Yes.
Okay. I'll move for the admission of exhibit 41.
What was that for?
Okay. And in this letter, this is in reference to meeting with Mr. Crossingham about the Snyder Ranch area. You see that?
Yes.
And the second sentence of that first paragraph says, quote, "I know you are concerned about future traffic in that area." Did I read that correctly?
Yes.
So you had been told by Mr. Crossingham that there was concern about the truck traffic relating to the Snyder Ranch amendment area, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And then you go on to say, "I can assure you that when we complete the mining that was illustrated, excuse me, by the dots." What does the dots mean?
I don't know. I have to find it there. Where are you reading?
It's the third sentence of the first paragraph.
Yeah, basically what I'm saying, when we complete the mining, I believe it's in this area, that we could release those claims to him.
So you were willing to give those back, right? Essentially quit claim those back to my client.
After we were through mining, yeah.
Well, let's look at the next paragraph. And it's this third sentence up from the bottom on the second paragraph. It says, quote, "It is true that we will be out of the Snyder Ranch area by April 30th, 2020, as you have requested on our TTT lease," right? So he was.
Well, it's true to the extent if we have the permit. I mean, this was under the understanding that we were going to be able to get a permit.
Right. And so the discussion is to make sure that the permit that you were going to apply for would say, we're going to be out by April 30th of 2020, right?
Well, this is always under the assumption that we would get his Form 8 acceptance.
And he was conditioning his consent because he wanted to make sure that you guys would be out of there by April 30th of 2020.
But he never gave us his consent.
Because you wouldn't give him assurance that you would be out by then.
I would be out of the Snyder Ranch area. That's true.
And the Snyder Ranch area, as we discussed before, included not only here, but also the Herco Amendment area, right? It was all one and the same.
It was all predicated on the fact that we had to have, if we could get the permit, we would accelerate our mining and we would do everything possible to be out of the area. That's true.
Right. And then what you did is you wanted to condition it and say, but we're going to retain other parts of the Tisdale Mountain for the foreseeable future, telling him, hey, too bad, we're not going to be out by April 30th of 2020.
We would be out of the Herco Amendment.
It says the Snyder Ranch Amendment, which is both of those areas.
Well, yes, we would be out of the Snyder Ranch.
Okay, but that's not what you told him.
Mr. Klosterman? I think Mr. Thorson stated about 5 5 different ways that he's gonna do everything he can to be out of there. And I don't know how we can get him to say any different. He's already said.
Well, I think the letter speaks for itself because it clearly says he's not going to be out of there. Let's look at the next paragraph. I have offered to pay surface damages on the Bobcat claim and the Herco Minerals where you own the respective surface. You see that?
Yeah.
Okay, what did you offer?
I don't recall. It says you suggested $500 per acre, which is much higher than we paid in the past.
Okay. But the agreement was from the TTT Ranch. They were willing to give you their consent to allow you to do this mining in the entire Snyder Ranch area without having to pay any surface damages, with the understanding that you would be out by April 30th of 2020. That was the deal, right? You wouldn't have to pay any surface damages. But when you refused to say we're going to be out by 2020, then there was this discussion about, okay, we'll pay you some surface damages because we are not going to be out by that time.
Well, I don't recall. I can't recall all the conversations.
I have nothing further. Thank you.
Any more questions for the council members?
No, we'll rest.
We do, but I would like to, I guess, present to the court and argue, or to the council, my argument at this point, now that the petitioner has closed their evidence.
Madam Chair, I suggest a break for personal use.
We'll take a 10-minute break. We can't take it back to 5, no matter what we do.
Okay.
So we'll just say 10. So 20 after.
have your list. And I've got it right here. Yeah, the O, P, Q, and R, actually. Yeah, O, P, Q, R.
Mr. Buck,
Yes.
2 minutes to make your argument, and then Mr. Ditto, you give his response for 2 minutes. Okay.
Thank you, Madam Councilwoman. On behalf of the respondents, I would respectfully request that the EQC at this point deny the petitioner's request for order in lieu of surface owner consent pursuant to 35-11-406B12 on the basis that the statutory elements that are set forth in 406B have not all been met, and specifically that the subsections B, C, and D have not been satisfied. It's clear that in this matter, with regards to an order in lieu of surface owner consent, the burden of proof is on the petitioner. And with respect to element or factor B, that the evidence that has been presented here today shows that the mining plan and the reclamation plan is not detailed so as to illustrate the full proposed surface use, including the proposed routes of egress and ingress. I believe the undisputed testimony is that the mining and reclamation plan do not contain this detailed information regarding the full proposed surface use as well as the routes of egress and ingress. Next, with regards to the element C, that the use does not substantially prohibit the operations of the surface owner. There has not been testimony from the petitioners in regards to knowing exactly what those surface operations are, other than to say that generally there's ranching operations, but they haven't described how the mining plan will not prohibit the operations, those types of operations. And specifically, we know that when you are taking out this acreage from a ranching operation, that those lands are no longer capable of being used for grazing operations, as an example. We also heard testimony in regards to how animals have been injured or have received injuries as a result of the fact that they do not fence out of their mining areas. And finally, with regards to element D, that the proposed plan reclaims the surface to its approved future use in segments, if circumstances permit, as soon as feasibly possible. We haven't heard any testimony in regards to how soon that reclamation process is going to occur and whether or not that is as soon as feasibly possible. There's been a complete dearth of any evidence to establish that element. Based upon the failure to present this evidence, we would respectfully request at this time that the EQC deny the order in lieu of surface owner consent. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would respectfully disagree with Mr. Klosterman. I believe that we have satisfied each of the 4 requirements. Mr. Gibson testified that the mining and reclamation plan, number 1, were provided. And that was Exhibit 25. 45 pages plus the large map, Exhibit 42, that shows the location of all the activity on the Herco Amendment. is the mining plan and reclamation plan detailed so as to illustrate the full proposed surface use. The map alone is very descriptive. And then we have another 44 pages or so in the mining and reclamation plan that detail what's going to happen out there. And we have a fair amount of testimony here today talking about what's in that mining and reclamation plan. That the use does not substantially prohibit the operations of the surface owner. We have testimony that the TTT ranch is 60,000 plus acres, and the impact here is less than 30 acres. I believe Mr. Lawson said 28.7 acres or something like that, of area that's going to be mined. Even though the Herco Amendment takes in 347 acres, a lot of that does not get mined. Yes, I think Black Hills acknowledges that there is some dust out there, but in all the years that they have been there, they have received little or no complaint from Mr. Crossingham, and he didn't even respond to the mining and reclamation permit. He didn't, when they provided that information to him, he did not call them and say, hey, I have concerns about this. You would think that if he really was concerned, he would say, I think, can you do this or can you do that? There has to be an open dialogue. But when Mr. Thorson tried to talk to him on the plane, as he testified, Mr. Crossingham didn't want to talk about it. But nevertheless, the details were provided in the plan, and it does impact a very small piece of the ranch. And finally, the proposed plan does reclaim the surface to its approved future use in segments as soon as feasibly possible, as Mr. Lawson testified and as Mr. Thorson testified. They'd like to get on there and get it done, but they've been held up because they haven't had a permit. They've paid $75,000 to Mr. Crossingham, and that was for two claims, the TTT-10 and also part of the Snyder Amendment. When he signed the Snyder Amendment, he didn't deny access for that. He granted them access, but now he claims they don't have the right of access, and he's taken the money, but he's denied them access to the TTT-10. So yes, we believe that we have met all of those requirements in the statute. Thank you.
I'm going to deny the motion, and we're all here to hear all the evidence. And you have any
Yes. The first witness that we would like to call on behalf of the respondents is Clayton McGuire. As we had previously moved for a continuance, Mr. McGuire suffered an illness and was hospitalized, and therefore was unable to come and attend the hearing here in Cheyenne. He's on a PIC line and can't leave his home, but he is available by telephone, and I would like to call him as our first witness. And who do I give the number to, or?
Just recite it, Joe, or bring it over to Joe.
Okay. The telephone number.
You need me to move those maps around.
Put it on here.
Hardboard there.
That'll lighten up the atmosphere.
Is that on his phone?
That's the
Oh,
elevator music between the time before somebody answers.
No hip hop or anything like that, to kind of line us up.
All they give us.
It is in the middle of the afternoon.
You just gotta pay for this.
He's there?
Was that your cell phone, Scott?
He just answered. Can you hear him?
I can hear him.
Yes.
Okay. Hello there. Can you hear us?
Yeah.
Okay. Lost your- or- trying to hear us?
How do we do the swearing? Okay, Kathy needs to swear you in, and then, we will begin your testimony.
Sir, can you hear me?
Yeah, you're breaking up.
Hold on. No, don't touch it. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Sir?
Something else. Can you hear us?
Sir, can you hear us?
I'm gonna try to call him again.
What's his name?
His first name is Clayton. and his-
Clayton, go ahead and hang up. We're gonna try and call you again.
Clayton McGuire.
Clayton McGuire, yes.
MC or MC?
MC, Guire.
Can you tell me, is this a cell phone or a landline?
It's a landline, his home number.
Ring.
Joining the conference now. This conference is being recorded by the organizer.
Hello.
Hi, Mr. McGuire. Can you hear us?
There. Yeah, now I can hear you.
Did you hear Kathy's attempt to swear you in?
I couldn't hear any, I haven't heard anything for quite a while.
Okay, then we're gonna have our court reporter swear you in, so you should hear her come on and.
Okay.
Sir, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Do.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. McGuire. Could you please state your full name?
Clayton Ralph McGuire,
And Mr. McGuire, what is your current address?
1203 TTT Road, KC, Wyoming.
And how are you currently employed?
I'm the manager for the TTT Ranch.
How long have you been the manager of the TTT Ranch?
11 and a half years.
Mr. McGuire, how long, as the ranch manager for the TTT Ranch, can you tell us what are your general job duties and responsibilities?
Just maintain the well-being of the ranch and keep all of the improvements in good shape, maintain the livestock, and keep a current grazing plan going.
Okay. As the ranch manager, how long have you been ranching in the KC area?
I'm in this area in Wyoming all my life, but in this area just 11 and a half years.
Okay. So before you became the ranch manager for the TTT Ranch, did you also do other ranching in that area of Wyoming?
Yes, around Casper and Douglas.
Can you tell us, Mr. McGuire, what is your educational background?
High school education and school of hard knocks, I guess.
Okay. And where did you go to high school?
Wheatland, Wyoming.
And what year did you graduate?
1972.
Do you remember what year it was that you first started as the ranch manager for the TTT Ranch?
Yeah, September 1st, 2006.
Mr. McGuire, here in Cheyenne, where we're conducting this hearing, I have with me a map of what includes the TTT Ranch that was prepared by Grouse Mountain. Are you familiar with that map?
Somewhat, yes.
Okay. And am I correct that on this map that was prepared by Grouse Mountain, that the areas that are identified in pink, that those are the surface lands owned by the TTT Ranch?
I get, Your Honor, this, Madam
I
Chair.
believe so, yes.
I guess I'm going to object. I've never seen this exhibit. It was not submitted as an exhibit, and
It's just for demonstrative purposes.
Submitted as an exhibit?
At this point, I just believe it's for demonstrative purposes only.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Okay.
excuse me, could I have a clarification on that? I mean, if he's going to be testifying to it, it seems like to me that's no different than admitting it as an exhibit. And so I have concerns about, you know, him testifying something that we've never seen.
What is this map?
This map is a map that shows the land surface areas of the TTT Ranch.
Okay, who put it together?
It was prepared by Grouse Mountain.
Okay, as long as it's for demonstrative purposes, I'll let you use it for.
Okay. Mr. McGuire, we're here today talking about the HERCO amendment area. And with respect to this map that we're using for demonstrative purposes, are you aware of what area on this demonstrative map would include the HERCO amendment?
Yes.
And is there a letter, or how is that identified?
Let's see, I think the part that they're already mining is D and claim number 11. And then the part that's not being mined is B, claim number 10.
Okay.
That's right. I hope that's.
And for purposes of just for showing the EQC members on this map, there is this areas that are identified with letters. And what you'll see here is there's a B, which Mr. McGuire has identified as being the TTT number 10 mining claim, which is part of the HERCO amendment. And then I believe he just testified that the letter D represents the TTT number 11. Is that correct, Mr. McGuire?
Yes.
Okay. And so the areas of B and D, the surface lands, are they owned by the TTT Ranch?
As far as I know, they are, yes.
Okay. Mr. McGuire, as the ranch manager, have you observed that Black Hills Bentonnite conduct Bentonnite mining operations on the TTT Ranch?
Yes.
And
quite a bit.
okay. quite a bit. And Mr. McGuire, if you can speak up as best as you can, I know it's hard over the telephone, but if you could
Okay.
speak up as best as you can, that would help our court reporter.
Okay, is that better?
Yes, thank you. Approximately how long has Black Hills Bentonnite used and occupied the TTT Ranch surface for its mining operations?
Oh, boy, that was way before my time. For a long time they have.
Okay. But for the years that you've been the ranch manager, have they been conducting Bentonnite mining operations?
Yes, they had several mines going the whole time I've been here.
Okay. And are you familiar with the drainages that run through the various parts of the TTT Ranch property?
Yes.
And where this Herco Amendment area is, are there any drainages that run through that proposed area?
Yes, there is.
And what are the drainages that run through that area?
Oh, there's Million Creek and Hot Water Creek. I can't remember, it's Howard Creek, maybe. And they all drain into to Wall Creek, which drains into the South Fork of the Powder River, which drains into the main Powder River.
Okay. And with respect to those drainages, are those ephemeral streams, or could you describe what types of drainages those are?
They're small year-round streams.
Okay.
Just mainly stock and livestock water.
And so can you describe for the council what sort of cattle operations are conducted on the TTT Ranch?
We're a cow-calf operation, and we run all the calves over to yearlings and winter them at the ranch.
Okay.
And we take all the yearlings to the feedlot.
Can you describe for the panel the size of the cattle operation? How many cow-calf pairs do you typically run?
Typically run about 1,000 cow-calf pairs.
Okay. And for your cow-calf pairs, do you utilize the drainages or streams for watering of those cow-calf pairs?
Yes.
Are you aware, or were you presented with a copy of the, I'll strike that. Were you ever contacted by anyone from Black Hills Bentonnite in regards to their proposed mine plan or reclamation plan for the Herco Amendment area?
Not personally. I haven't. Through the office, I've heard about it.
Okay. But did they ever personally contact you in any way to discuss the proposed mine plan or reclamation plan for the Herco Amendment?
I guess I'm
Not that I remember, no.
Line of testimony, Madam Chair. We've heard evidence that it was submitted to the owner, and that's what the requirement is. There's not a requirement that they go through this with the ranch manager, and it's just taking up precious time, frankly.
Your Honor, we heard testimony from Bruce Lawson, who said that he had personally had conversations with Mr. McGuire about this proposed plan. I should be able to refute that.
Go ahead.
So, did you ever have any conversations with Bruce Lawson from Black Hills Bentonnite about the mine plan or the reclamation plan for the Herco Amendment?
Not that I recall.
Okay. Did anyone with Black Hills Bentonnite ever discuss with you the amount of time that they were stating that it would take to perform the mining operations as part of the Herco Amendment?
No, I was at a, sorry, what?
Did anyone from Black Hills Bentonnite ever talk with you and tell you that the proposed mining plan for the Herco amendment would take a certain amount of time and that they would complete their operations in a given amount of time?
Not to me personally. I was at a meeting with the owner, Jim Crossingham, and I believe Bob Perry and Tom Thorson, and they were talking about the time frame at that time.
Was there a discussion during that meeting to have those operations completed before May 1st of 2020?
Yes, I believe that was a date sometime in 2020.
Okay. And did you hear anything from Black Hills Bentonnite that indicated that they would in fact complete their mining operations before such time?
Yeah, that was the I guess the drift that I got that they were going to get it done by then.
Okay. At any time, did anyone from Black Hills Bentonnite ever have any discussions with you as the ranch manager in regards to how Black Hills Bentonnite could accommodate the surface operations that the ranch performs with respect to their mine and reclamation plan?
Not that I recall, no.
Mr. McGuire, have you personally observed the mining and reclamation efforts of Black Hills Bentonnite on the TTT ranch?
Yes.
And can you describe for the panel members here how it is that Black Hills Bentonnite has conducted its mining operations on the TTT ranch?
Well,
question, it's so broadly worded, how they've conducted their mining operations. It gets way outside the Herco amendment and just opens it up to anything.
At this point, we are addressing the actual effects on the surface owner. I think I'll let this go for a short period.
Mr. McGuire, do you need me to repeat my question?
yes, please.
Okay. I was asking you about your personal observations of mining operations conducted by Black Hills Bentonnite on the TTT ranch. And specifically, I would like you to describe to the council your observations of how Black Hills Bentonnite performs its mining operations when they go out and open a pit. How do they do that?
Okay, yeah, I've observed it, and pretty much they just go in there and with a bunch of scrapers and tie into it, and I don't know. Then it very seldom ever gets cleaned up. They just tear into an area, and then, as far as I know, there's hardly any that's ever been reclaimed. I mean, some of the topsoil piles have grass seeded on them to keep them, but there's since I've been here, I don't know that there's been just maybe a few hundred acres reclaimed.
Have you observed, Mr. McGuire, a mining technique where they come in and they perform what's called sequential cuts into a mine pit?
Yeah, I think if we're talking the same thing, yes, they start one cut and then they take the overburden off the second cut and put it in the first cut once it's empty, and then just continue on that way.
Okay. And when they finish mining in that first cut, do they reclaim that area or do they leave it?
I've seen on the neighbors where they've reclaimed some, but I haven't seen where they've done it on the 3T.
You described just a moment ago that you've seen on the 3T ranch where Black Hills Bentonnite would stockpile topsoil. Is that right?
Yes.
And the topsoil is there for such a long period of time that other things start to grow in it?
Yeah, there's some piles around that's got sagebrush growing on them, so it takes a long time to grow sagebrush.
Any questions?
They were there way before my time.
I understand you want us to understand his mining things, but I really want to understand what the impacts are to the range.
Okay. So, Mr. McGuire, can you talk about and explain to the council what are the impacts that you have observed that result from Black Hills Bentonite's mining operations or hauling operations of bentonite on the 3T Ranch? How do they affect the surface operations?
The main problem, I think, is the dust from hauling the bentonite, and then there's quite a few pits that fill up with water and stuff that aren't fenced, and it's really, really poor quality water. And sometimes it gets to be real muddy, and it's a kind of a hazard to livestock.
Would you describe in detail for the panel or for the council what you mean by the dust and what effect it has on your surface operations? Can you describe that in more detail?
Okay, yeah, the dust off of when they're hauling that bentonite, if there's not much wind, it scatters over a huge area, and it sticks on the grass, and the livestock won't hardly graze that. Well, they won't. Them areas until after we start getting some dews or some moisture to wash that dust off. They pretty much avoid those areas. The wildlife too, I've noticed they don't go around there hardly.
Okay, so the dust on the native, are those native grasses or are they hay fields? What are they?
They're just native grasses. They don't go through any of our hay fields.
Okay. And so when the dust accumulates, am I correct that the livestock will not eat that and that they'll move to other locations to try and feed?
Yes. Yeah. Then you can see the dust on the grass. It kind of all turns gray. It's a really, at times of the year, it's a really arid area. It's hot and dry and no gravel really. It's mainly just dirt. So there's a lot of dust.
Okay. Have you observed Black Hills Bentonite do anything to try and control or limit the dust that's caused by their traffic on these roads?
I think it was a year ago, they did have a water truck running part-time. It wasn't enough, he couldn't keep up, but they did have him out there part of the time. And then he ran out of water. They were pumping out of some pits and then they quit.
Okay. Now, can you tell us also, can you describe for us the amount of truck traffic that's coming in and out of the ranch to do these mining operations?
Yeah, it varies. Sometimes there's just a few trucks and sometimes there are a lot of trucks, just one after another. I don't know how they get them filled so fast. I've never really watched them load them or anything, but there's a lot of trucks sometimes.
Okay. And the truck traffic, can you describe or give us an idea of how many miles on the TTT ranch that they are coming in and out in order to do this loading and taking it out?
I don't know. Are we just talking where that HERCO amendment is, or the other mines too?
Well, let's talk about how many miles it would be for them to come and get down to the HERCO amendment area. Do you know how many miles that is of road?
I'm guessing it's 5 or 6 miles on the 3T.
Okay. And that's just on the 3T surface lands, correct?
Yes, and then it goes on to another landowner there, I suppose maybe a couple miles.
Okay. Can you describe for the council your observations of the stockpiles that Black Hills Bentonite uses on the TTT ranch and for how long those piles have been there?
Those stockpiles of bentonite?
Or overburden or topsoil, whatever.
Yeah, I don't know, the Benttonite's been there for, it depends. I don't know how I've never been able to figure out what they want and when they want it, or yeah, sometimes they're there for a long time and sometimes they're there just a short time, but usually seems like it's 2 or 3 years until they get it dried. And then, I know there's a couple of piles of overburden it's been there the full 10 years that I've been here, or 11.
Is there dust that comes off of, for instance, the overburden piles?
To some extent, I think most of them, they'll take in and they drill some triticale grass in there to kind of limit that.
Okay. Now, are you familiar with Black Hills Benttonite's operations and how they have affected any of the drainages that are in the area where they're mining?
Yes, yeah, there's a lot of sediment washes down those drainages into the streams and stuff and reservoirs.
And did you observe that Black Hills Benttonite does anything to try and reduce or eliminate that from happening?
No, I've never seen where they put any berms or stuff up to slow that down, or where they have pits to catch the runoff or anything.
You described earlier, Mr. McGuire, that where these mining pits are, that sometimes that they fill up with water and become muddy. Is that right?
Yes.
Has the TTT Ranch lost any livestock as a result of livestock getting into those pits?
Yeah, we've lost 2 but once they get in there, they just kind of disappear under the mud and stuff. I know of 2 that we've lost because of that.
Okay. And is that because there was no fencing around those mine pits?
Yes, they don't put any fence around them.
Okay. And with regards to water that you've seen accumulate in these pits, have you observed what Black Hills Benttonite does with that water?
I've seen them pumping it out of the pits over the hill into the next drainage before.
Okay. And how would you describe the quality of the water that was being pumped over the hill into these other drainages?
It was more of a slurry than water. It was really, really muddy water. Some reason that water never does clear up when it's in those pits.
With respect to the TTT Ranch, do you know whether or not there has ever been a road agreement that was entered into with the Black Hills Benttonite to come in from the north from the interstate?
Not that I know of up to that, up where that Herco is, but most of that was done before my time, but I don't know of any road agreement there. I know that 2 other mines there is a road agreement.
With respect, excuse me, with respect to the roads that come through the TTT Ranch, are there any gates?
Yeah, well, there's auto gates, yes, and there's one gate that we keep locked during elk hunting season.
Okay, and the auto gate that you described, Mr. McGuire, does Black Hills Benttonite or their trucking contractors, do they leave those open?
Well, the auto gates are just, yeah, they're in the ground and they keep the livestock from crossing and let the trucks go. But the lock gate, we've had trouble with them keeping that closed.
Okay. And what's the trouble that results from not keeping that closed?
Well, that one there, which goes up towards that Herco thing, we try to keep some control over the hunting during hunting season and the people that are going in and out of there. And if the gate's open, they just go right on through.
And so do you have people in the public who are using that road to obtain access to areas that are private?
Yes.
And when you've had these problems, how did you bring it to the attention of the contractors or to Black Hills Bentonnite?
Usually it hasn't happened for a year or two. I'll get a hold of Bob Perry and he'd get things straightened out with them.
Okay.
And at one time they did have, instead of opening and closing the gate, they had a lady sitting there making sure that only trucks went through.
Okay. Are they continuing to do that?
They haven't done that since that time. They've moved to a different area during the time when we have that gate locked. Except maybe with their reclamation crew or stripping crew or something. But as far as the trucks, they've moved to other areas. And whenever we lock that, we make sure that they have a lock on there or know what the combinations are to the locks, so they can get in and out.
Have you had any problems with the hauling or the truckers giving out the passcodes to people in the public?
You know, that's kind of hard to get a handle on, but I know that public people do, other people around do know what them codes are because they go through the gates without tearing them up. So I don't know how they get a hold of that, but they do know what it is sometimes.
Okay. But that's not information that TTT would be giving out to allow other people to come onto the property. Is that true?
True. Yeah. No, we just give I don't know, D. Simonson, I think now is the one that I make sure he has the passcode. Before it was Bob Perry.
With respect
on the gates that they install they've got some automatic openers. They have their own passcode and their own, like a garage door opener clicker thing that they can open and close the gates with.
Could you describe for the council what type of hunting operations are done on the TTT ranch?
Yeah, we have at least to an outfitter and just to control things so that so it's not dangerous and there are people around shooting all over to everybody else, and we know who's hunting and where they're hunting and that, and they hunt elk and mule deer and whitetail deer in the areas where there are whitetail deer and antelope.
And have you observed that the wildlife and their habitat or their eating habits are affected by the dust as well?
Yeah, they don't like to eat dirty food either. I mean, it's basically like dropping your hamburger in the dirt and then picking it up and eating it. So, yeah, they shy away from those areas.
Okay. Mr. McGuire, has Black Hills Bentonite's surface operations or their mining operations in the past, have they prohibited or substantially prohibited in any way the ranching operations that you conduct out at that mine or out at the TTT ranch?
Not really. I mean, it's a large enough place and we have large pastures, so there's room for them to go other places. Some years we don't get that area grazed if we don't get moisture before we move the livestock out.
Okay. And when there's these stockpiles dispersed throughout the ranching surface, are your livestock able to feed in those areas?
Yeah, just whatever they plant on them, just to kind of keep the erosion down. They do graze on that some.
Okay. But in the areas where the truck traffic is, do they move away from that?
Pretty much, yeah. Yeah, there might be a few there sometimes, but very little. They're not there very long.
Generally, what time of year is your calving operations on the ranch?
We start calving the 1st of May and calve probably through mainly the 1st of July, but we have some late ones on into the middle of July.
And does the mining operations, the past mining operations, do they have an impact on your calving?
I don't think so. I don't think that it really bothers them. It has to a certain amount because there's driving down through there, but it doesn't bother them too bad.
Okay. Do they move into different areas because of the traffic?
Yeah, they do. They do, even on if it's a county road or where we try not to calve next to the roads, but they get back off by themselves.
With respect to the truck traffic and the dust that's created, does that impact you, for instance, when you're out driving on the ranch itself?
Yeah, we well, when they put their haul roads in, they a lot of times cut through our traditional 2-track roads. So we basically have to use their haul roads to get around. And we try to be considerate. And if I see a truck coming or something, I usually pull off and let him go on by. But to stay out of their way because they're bigger. But yeah, you have to really watch.
Okay.
Sometimes you can't see the next truck coming because the dust from the one that just went by you.
And as a result of the dust and the visibility issues, have you had any close calls or issues with regards to your own travel?
Yes, several times. Had some close calls with, mainly that's what it is. One truck goes by and there's another one right behind him, and they can't see you and you can't see them. So,
have you made any request to any of the drivers that are out there to try and curtail the speed limit of how fast they're going, or how many trucks travel together?
I really haven't. There's several different contractors that are in there. I've visited with Bob Perry about it a time or two. And they have put up speed limit signs that I don't know who patrols that and whether they are, but there is some signs up to try to slow them down. We have some oil field traffic on the one road, and they're calling me all the time complaining about being run off the road.
All right. Thank you, Mr. McGuire. I don't have any further questions, but I'm sure there'll be some other questions from the attorney for the petitioner or from the council members. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Do I stay on here or?
Please.
Yeah, just stay on the line, please.
Okay.
Mr. Ditto.
Thank you. Mr. McGuire, my name is Dave Ditto, and I represent Black Hills. And I would like to follow up with a few questions if I could. Can you hear me okay?
Can.
Very good. Did Mr. Crossingham give you a copy of the mining and reclamation plan?
I don't know that I have a copy. There's a copy available in his office. And I don't know if it's still there or not, or if it's gone back to North Carolina.
Did he provide you with a copy of that?
I've seen it, put it that way.
When did you see it?
Oh, it's been a while. This has been going on for, I don't know how long, but quite a while.
Can you give me an estimate of approximately when you saw it?
Oh, I suppose over a year ago.
Okay. And who provided that to you? Was that Mr. Crossingham?
Yeah, his secretary mailed it out, and I've got it on on some emails, but I don't have a big enough computer system to get it all out.
Okay.
So I can't look at it through there. But she did mail it out, and then I sent it back.
Okay. I believe you, in your testimony, you said that in those discussions that Black Hills told you that they would finish up on that HERCO amendment by 2020.
Yeah, they didn't necessarily tell me, but I was there, and that was the time they were talking about.
Okay.
It's a pretty easy number to remember, so.
You testified that that they make a mess and it very seldom ever gets cleaned up. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
Have you taken any photographs of the lack of cleanup?
Can you repeat that? I didn't get all that.
Have you taken any photographs of the problems that you see?
No.
You've been there 11 and a half years and you've never taken a photograph of the problems that you just testified about?
No, it's kind of ongoing everywhere, so.
It would be important to document that then, wouldn't it, if it's ongoing?
I guess.
In other words, if you really wanted to be, if you really wanted people to believe you and to be credible, a picture tells 1,000 words, right?
Check to the form.
I guess so, yeah. You can still come and look, so it's still there.
Okay. And you talk about, you mentioned that they let the pits fill up with water. Again, have you taken any pictures of the pits that fill up with water?
Oh, but I've got them. I can look on GPS or an OnX Hunt program, and you can see it.
Have you written a letter or put anything in writing to Black Hills, Mr. Thorson or Mr. Lawson?
Oh, that's not really part of my duties the way I see it. That's kind of comes from the main office. They do all the legal stuff.
Well, if you're the ranch manager and you see something out there that is really disturbing the ranch, that would be important to communicate to Black Hills, wouldn't it?
I guess, and that would go through the ranch owners and the main office.
That certainly, I'm sure it could happen that way. So yes, if all of those concerns that you have were communicated to Black Hills, then they could correct those concerns, couldn't they?
I suppose. I've talked to Bob Perry about it some when he was here about some of the stuff, and they did work on some of it.
Okay. You testified that none of the roads run through the hayfields, I guess. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And you did see them out there with the water trucks watering the road?
They water part of it, yes.
Okay.
They've never watered any that I'm aware of up where the HERCO part is. It was over to a mine over on the west part of the property.
Okay. Have you kept any kind of journal or anything like that documenting the disturbances that you've seen from Black Hills?
No.
Okay, so there's really no record that you have that sort of recounts what you've seen?
No, other than the fact that it's still there.
Well, you testified that they had reclaimed some area, so you know, that wouldn't be the same, would it?
No.
And if Black Hills was pumping dirty water into the drainages, that's not something that continues. That's something you'd want to document when it happens, correct?
It's pretty much ongoing, so I mean, they've got pumps sitting around. They pump out in pits all the time.
Have you communicated all these concerns to Mr. Crossingham?
Yes, he's aware of it.
When did you do that?
I don't know when he's out and we talk about stuff over the years, but it's just an ongoing thing. He's seen some of it too.
Do you send him emails to document or to tell him when you see things like this?
No, we don't do much communicating over the computer.
Okay.
And the phone service is kind of sketchy, and I usually don't communicate with him a whole lot unless he's on the property.
You mentioned two cattle that had been lost in mine pits. Is that right?
Yes.
Certainly, it'd be very important to document that. When did those happen?
Oh, I don't know. It was several years ago.
And who did you talk to at Black Hills about that?
Some of the guys that worked there, I don't know, just remember just who they were, because I don't think Bob Perry was there at the time. In fact, I know he wasn't. I might have talked to Dee Simonson.
And so was it a cow? Was it a calf? What was lost?
Yearling steer.
And did the steer die?
Yes.
Did Black Hills compensate the ranch for that animal?
I don't know for sure, to tell you the truth.
So you don't know if and whether it was resolved?
Yeah. They did come and put a one wire electric fence around there for a couple days, and then they got a big crew in there and filled the pit in.
Okay. You said that Black Hills has some automated gates?
Yes.
Where are those located?
One of them is located off of the TTT County Road. The only one that is on us, and goes to I think they call it Peterson Draw.
So there's what, two automated gates?
They're just the one there that's on the 3T.
Okay.
They have some other gates that are just manual gates, but they're never closed.
Okay. Would you expect that when you discuss these concerns with Mr. Crossingham, that he would, well, let me ask it this way. Are your instructions not to complain to Black Hills about their operations, but rather to report to Mr. Crossingham?
I wouldn't say that I was ever instructed that way, but it's his place, and I don't want to be stepping in doing things beyond my duties, I guess. So some of the legal stuff and stuff like that and negotiations, I leave that to him.
I see. And he's a long ways, he's where, North Carolina?
Yes, yes. And I don't have any power of attorney or anything to take care of any of that kind of stuff, so.
So you're responsible for the livestock then, and the grazing rotation, things like that?
Yes, and the rancher, yes.
There is a lot of oil truck traffic on that Wall Creek Road, isn't there?
Not that I've ever seen. They go in there I don't know just how many, just a few loads a week of oil that goes out of there. And mainly it's just two different companies that do the pumping, so I haven't really ever noticed very much oil traffic out of there.
What's that oil field called down there?
I don't know who owns it now. It changes hands all the time. It's a Tisdale Mountain. I think it's Tisdale Mountain East and Tisdale Mountain North.
Okay.
That's what's on the sign.
Has your outfitter or any of your hunters complained to you personally about Black Hills operations?
No, other than we had them lock the gate on the Hall Road going to Peterson Draw because they were losing. They have hunting blinds up there, and somebody was going in there. And most of the other gates we have them controlled, but somebody was going in there and stealing their hunting blinds. And that's when they put the automatic gate up there.
That's when Black Hills put the automatic gate in?
Yes.
Okay, so basically they did that to help prevent theft on your property.
Yes, well, there was a gate there, and I informed them that we were having trouble, and it was my understanding that we could lock that gate during hunting season, and they said yes, that was the case. I believe it was Bob Perry then.
Okay.
And they had a guy out there and watched it for a couple days so their drivers wouldn't have to open and close it. And then the same guy put in a automatic gate there.
Okay.
We try not to use them gates any more than we have to, so just makes it hard on everybody.
Okay, very good. If you'll hold on just a minute here, I think I'm about done.
Okay.
Does the ranch do any calving in the area of the Herco Amendment?
Oh.
Okay.
That doesn't mean that we couldn't someday, but for right now, we don't.
And haven't for a number of years, I take it?
Right. No, we haven't.
Okay. And when do you graze that area?
Mainly be the last week of June through, probably through the end of October.
Okay. So the mining does not prevent the grazing. They still graze the area, correct?
Yes.
Okay. That's all I have. Thank you,
Okay.
Mr. McGuire.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I do. Mr. McGuire, there's been a fair amount of discussion about some of the drainages in the area of this amendment. And I wasn't clear on an earlier response, but I'm thinking of the three kinds of streams we have in Wyoming, right? Intermittent, perennial, and so the near this, in this amendment, is there any stream that flows year-round?
Yes, all three of those streams are spring-fed.
Okay.
And they might not flow very much, but they flow. The one has a small reservoir on it, so it doesn't flow for a ways below that reservoir, but then it does on down. But the other ones, Hot Water Creek flows a really good stream year-round. And I believe Million Creek is the one with the little reservoir on it, and it's spring fed. And it's a year-round spring or stream.
So are you, do you know that there's a water quality division in the DEQ that manages and is responsible for making sure that applicants have permits to discharge into those streams?
I'm not, that's kind of out of my.
Okay. I thought it might given the testimony, sir, but I thought I would just get that out into the air in the room.
Yeah, I'm sure it's there. I know that the oil field has to maintain theirs and test the water once a month, the water that they pump out of the ground and disperse down the streams. And I've seen them doing it, but I've never seen Black Hills doing anything like that.
Okay, I'm just thinking about if they're pumping into a stream, is there anybody from water quality here? I'm not reacting to the last question I have, and I've been curious about this, and I realize that this map that you were discussing for demonstrative purposes is just that. But Tisdale Mountain, you know, I heard earlier today that there's one road that actually goes over the other potential egress is the road that goes over the top of Tisdale Mountain. I heard that correctly. And where is the top of Tisdale Mountain relative to the Herkel Amendment? How far, well, on the map, and then how far away? Can I do that? Sure. Well,
yeah, the Tisdale Mountain Road pretty much makes a big U.
okay.
The highest, are you talking about the highest point? One point by that Herco Amendment, it's only maybe a mile away, but it might be, Black Hills was doing some work on it last summer, and that's on a neighboring property, so I don't know if they got it fixed up so that part can be used or not, but it wasn't maintained for quite a few years.
No, that's okay. Your attorney was helping me locate it, so I'm happy with that. Thank you. That's all I have.
Okay.
Yeah. Hi, Mr. McGuire. This is Dave Bagley. Thanks for joining us. I hope you're feeling well and recovering. I just had one question. I'll preface it with a bit of a comment. I mean, your testimony has indicated that Bentonnite mining causes dust, has truck traffic, that there's issues with pits and things, and I think we all know that it's always a challenge with that these operations. What I want to ask though is, how much do you think the Herco Amendment will affect your operations in that area if they start mining there?
I guess the only way I know to answer that would be acre per acre, about the same as any of the other mining that's in the area. It's right in the middle of a pasture.
So that area is right in the middle of a pasture, and you said you use it last week of June through the end of October.
Yes. And we don't calve there. The elk used to calve there until they put a road up through there. And now I haven't seen them in there I remember when they put that road in 4 or 5 years ago.
Thank you, Mr. McGuire.
You're welcome.
Mr. McGuire, when you were asked a question, if mining operations are conducted in the Herco Amendment area, whether or not your livestock can continue to graze in that area, if you remove essentially the lands that are associated with the native grasses because you're mining, can you actually graze in that area anymore, or is that completely taken off the map?
It's pretty much just off the map. There isn't any forage really that grows there.
Okay. And based upon your experience, when Black Hills Bentonnite comes out and opens up a mine, is that area taken out of effective use for numerous years.
Yes.
And in your experience, how many years have you seen that this land is no longer available for any type of grazing?
Well, some of the existing places that were already there, where they were mining when I hired on here, they're still mining there, and there's nothing there, and there's no grazing there.
Thank you. That's all the questions I have.
Good.
Mr. McGuire, you said you had seen the mining and reclamation plan. Are you aware that the entire, all the mining and all the activity in the HERCO amendment area consists of about less than 30 acres?
Less than 30 acres?
Yes.
I thought it was more like a quarter of a section.
Well, the HERCO amendment takes in about 347 acres. I think that's what you're referring to.
Okay, maybe.
Have you seen the mining map that is included in the mining and reclamation plan that shows the outlines of the HERCO amendment?
I'm sure I have. I don't remember it, but I probably have.
And it shows little marks where the mining pits are going to be and where the overburden is going to be placed, things like that.
Yeah, I can't recall where that's at, but.
Well, let's talk about the drainages for just a minute. There was some question about drainages and the impact on those. Have you looked at it close enough to see whether the mining was, I guess, would still accommodate those drainages?
You mean would affect them?
Well, are there any mining pits or overburden piles or anything else within those drainages?
Yes.
And which drainage has a mining pit or overburden pile in it?
It's not right in the drainage, but it's in the area that drains into the drainage. You know, all of that is on a slope, and whenever there's moisture, water runs downhill. So it winds up in the drainage on any of those mining operations.
So which, have you taken a look to see where the mining pits are closest to any of those three drainages?
Oh, not for sure. There's all kinds of little finger draws run into those main drainages. So it's going to affect some of them through there.
Have you looked to see, what the closest mining pit or overburden pile is to any one of the three drainages?
It would probably have to be close to the Million Creek, because they've already got some mined over by Wall Creek.
By Wall Creek?
Yes.
Okay, that's not in the HERCO amendment, is it?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
That's in the Snyder Ranch. Part of that, I don't know how all that is, but they've mined on over into the Snyder Ranch area there, and they're right next to Wall Creek.
Okay. Did you say that Black Hills had put in speed limit signs?
I'm going to object. This is now clearly beyond any redirect or any questions from the council.
You're right. I'll withdraw the question. I don't have anything more.
Anybody else have any more questions? I would say let's take a 5-minute break. It seems like we need one. And and then we'll come back, and Mr. Custer will make this. And we'll go from there. Since we seem to be moving a lot faster this afternoon, and I know that there is a need to move this process forward, since it's been off for so long, I want to go ahead and do oral closing statements, and then we will go from there after all of the evidence.
Okay.
So what do we got?
Mr. McGuire?
Yes?
Okay, you can hang up. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Is he in the hospital?
No.
we'll want to make sure all your exhibits that have been received. So don't run out on me.
This was.
You need another water?
If you have one, sure. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much.
We got one last water. Andrew? Oh, last one. Oh, I still got it.
So are they gonna be tearing all this up too? Are they gonna be tearing all this up?
Yeah.
At the next phase?
Yes. So I'll let you work with Candy to get all your exhibits.
I found them.
So that she can take them from the transcript as well as from.
Anybody want to borrow my last one?
You could just give me those and I'll make.
I've got a couple here too. Who wants one?
Anybody want my last one? Is that a nice bottle of beer? Yeah.
Take one back and pass it around. Don't go running off.
Right, I know, you need to make sure we have all the exhibits. Yeah. I probably should. So, thanks for reminding me.
Thank you.
Should come in. Yeah. Well, I have a list. I have them right. Right here. Okay. Yeah. I could probably think you got something to yeah.
I just want you to know that you may have been contacted.
I have one if you need.
Oh, you do.
A gator, like a gator clip?
Even this little one.
Okay, yeah. Take that. You got the mail, so.
Yeah, he put them in here. For that one. You guys want me to take them? Keep them on the side.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's what I don't.
We've had people copy them before. Yeah.
Scott.
So you don't want Kevin headed the most of it?
Well, I just want to make sure I can get it out.
Okay. So would you be willing to make us a copy or whatever and send it back? It's a field or whatever, it's report to say, this is what we'll know, this is what we looked at. It's not mine. No, this is mine.
Yes, I would like to call as our next witness on behalf of the respondents, Tom Harlan. He is available by telephone.
Madam Chair, I did file a motion objecting to the evidence of other landowners because the description of evidence that is described in the disclosure statement is they're going to talk about Black Hills impacts on their ranches. It really has nothing to do with the Herco Amendment, doesn't even have anything to do with the TT lands, but I guess by analogy, because there's dust and other problems on other ranches that should be assumed that there's going to be trouble on the Herco Amendment. So that was my reason for my motion to strike these other witnesses, Mr. Harlan, and I believe there were a couple others that were listed.
Once again, I believe that this also goes to what would be the type of information that should have been provided to the surface landowner, in this case TTT Ranch. These other ranchers can talk about the operations that Black Hills Bentonnite has conducted on their ranches, whether or not they have provided the same or similar types of information in their mining plans or reclamation plans, and then also about the types of impacts that are occurring as a result of these same types of operations. So I believe it's directly relevant because it goes to the type of information that should be provided, how the lack of that information then results in the fact that these damages do occur and they're not provided or they're not given adequate information to assess whether or not a consent should be given.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
To me, this sounds like the kind of witness that would be brought forward if we were hearing complaint against the actual permit from after, say, the administrators decided to review the application and it's been sent out for publication. This type of witness, I would think, would be the kind you bring in for that. I don't see how it's relevant to the four things we're looking at today.
Your Honor, or Madam Chairwoman, I'm sorry, it's just habit. One of the things that I think is critical for this council to consider is, I've heard repeatedly today that these are matters that the surface landowner can bring up at a later time with respect to whether or not the DEQ is going to ultimately authorize the permit. If this council, in fact, gives a order in lieu of consent, that constitutes a waiver of any of my client's rights to contest these issues. You are authorizing on his behalf that this can go forward. It is a complete waiver of my client's ability to adequately address these concerns. It is a condition precedent that the application has to satisfy these requirements under the statutes before you can consider giving the order in lieu of the landowner's consent. It's by giving the order in lieu of, you're saying that, hey, we had an opportunity to review these matters, and these are all things that we took into consideration, but notwithstanding, we believe that consent should be given in lieu of all of that. And there is not a procedural mechanism by which the landowner, in this case, can then come back and try and assert or claim these deficiencies, which are apparent on the face of this application.
Can I respond?
Yeah, go ahead. Okay. Please respond, and then Mr. Cora, and I need to consult the attorney for a second, and then we'll make a roll.
What I thought I heard is that he wanted to talk about the permits and what was provided to those other landowners. Each of those, to the extent they were included in an amendment or there's mining, they have their own forum to object or to present their case. The other landowners, basically it's try to get into smear Black Hills. That's all it is. It's a smear job. It's not real evidence that's even related to the Herco Amendment and not even related to the TTT Ranch. You know, we're talking about other ranchers, and that's the only thing that's described in the testimony that they're supposed to give is that, well, you know, they've had dust on their ranches and that there's been disturbance of their ranches. The same thing that we've really heard here. So it would be redundant, and it's really not relevant to this hearing. Thank you.
I'm going to pass for a moment.
I think I am going to uphold the objection and not allow
Yes, ma'am.
Based on the fact that it's not relevant to this particular matter, there is an avenue to appeal the final permit and DEQ, and I would really encourage you to avail yourself of that if there are deficiencies after the permit has been issued. That's, I mean, we issued the order of consent last year and denied the final permit. Just because we issued the order of consent does not mean, if we're going to, does not mean that we might move forward. This is just one step. Any other witnesses?
No, I do not.
Then, I believe we are closing statements. So, Mr. Ditto?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, members of the council, for your patience. I know that it does get a little aggravating listening to us attorneys trying to hammer things home that we think you may not get yet, when in fact you understand the process probably better than we do. I believe that Black Hills has met all the requirements for the issuance of an order in lieu of landowner consent. Introduced into evidence was Exhibit 25 by Mr. Gibson, which is a certified letter to Mr. Crossingham with a copy of the mining plan, the reclamation plan, and Exhibit 42, the very detailed map up there that explained, where basically every activity on the Herco Amendment area is going to occur. And the total impact is under 30 acres, the mining. Yes, we understand that there will be some dust, and Black Hills tries to keep Mr. Thorson testified and Mr. McGuire testified that yes, they do have water trucks. They try to keep the dust down. It might not always happen depending on the weather. But the total impact is less than 30 acres. When you do the math on that, it's less than 1% of the Triple T lands. So there is not a huge impact, but I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm going to walk through these requirements. So there's absolutely no question, and I don't think the Triple T Ranch, I don't think the ranch disputed that A was met. There were objections to B, C, and D, but not to A. So I will move on. B, that the mining plan and reclamation plan is detailed so as to illustrate the full proposed surface use, including proposed routes of egress and ingress. I'm sorry. When I'm reading, I talk slower than I read. That the mining, second requirement is that the mining plan and the reclamation plan is detailed so as to illustrate the full proposed surface use, including proposed routes of egress and ingress. So the actual notebook that was sent to Mr. Crossingham was just like this. It was, this is what was sent to Mr. Crossingham. We've stapled it in a little exhibit for the council, but it was exactly this. And it's all in that, along with Exhibit 42, which sits right in the middle after the mining plan. The original Exhibit 1 that was filed with our petition included an exact copy with the map embedded in the notebook. But when I filed our exhibits, I filed 42 separately because it's a huge exhibit. And so the mining plan and the reclamation plan, it shows the locations of the pit areas. It shows the locations of the topsoil stockpile, the overburden stockpiles, the mine development area, If you look at the legend on the bottom of that, it details what all the colors are for, what they stand for, and it shows exactly what those 28.7 acres is going to be used for. It shows the exact location of the road entering the Herco Amendment, and it shows the exact location of the road exiting the Herco Amendment, which leads to the Snyder, what we referred to as the Snyder Amendment, which was approved earlier. And the access road, you heard testimony as well that the access road has already been permitted. It was permitted a number of years ago. And Mr. Crossingham knew that. He's owned this ranch since 1980 something. And Black Hills was mining it before he purchased the ranch. They were using the road before he purchased the ranch. And directly north of the Herco Amendment is what's referred to as the Butts lease, which is an approved mine, part of an approved mine permit for Black Hills. And the road is also part of that. So it is a very detailed plan. If that isn't enough, I don't remember whether it was which of our witnesses, but ultimately before this hearing, Black Hills provided this entire notebook, which is the entire permit, everything that's submitted to the state. And so they've had all the maps. There's probably 10 different maps in here. So they have received substantial detail about the mining and reclamation plan, all the details. At this point, they have all the details that the DEQ has. I have a whole another box of documents that were also provided to them. I won't bother to dig out those, but we have provided them everything that we have going back for several years, clear back when they were negotiating with what's called the Snyder Amendment, when the Herco Amendment was included within that. So the negotiations have gone on for some time. So the plans are detailed. The respondents have raised an issue about what they refer to as the Wall Creek Road. As our witnesses testified, no one has ever heard that objection in 50 years of mining out there. Nobody has ever told them that they don't have the right to use the Wall Creek Road or any other access road. It's just never been an issue. The first time that Black Hills heard about that was a week ago when the respondents filed their disclosure statement and said that you don't have the access right along the Wall Creek Road. That's the first time they've ever heard that complaint. And in fact, I would expect that if Mr. Crossingham believed that they didn't have access, he wouldn't have asked them to build an automatic gate to keep others out. You heard Mr. McGuire's testimony that they have come in, they've helped, they've built gates, they've done other things to accommodate the ranch. Does it substantially prohibit the operations of the surface owner? We heard a lot of testimony on that. It's a huge ranch. It's over 60,000 acres. They run cattle. The cattle can graze on the areas that are not mined, even within the Herco Amendment. Mr. McGuire's been there 11 and a half years, and although he testified to some problems out there, in 11 and a half years, he's never taken a picture. He's never talked, he never sent an email, never sent a letter to Black Hills. He's never complained to them about these problems. So you have to question some of the credibility or at least question how serious these things are if there really has not been enough concern to photograph or to send letters to Black Hills Ranch. Yes, I'm sure it does impact ranching, but it does not substantially prohibit it. And in fact, Mr. McGuire, that's exactly what he said, is he said, no, I don't think the HERCO amendment, it will substantially interfere or substantially prohibit the ranching operation. And finally, the last element, the proposed plan reclaims the surface to its approved future use in segments if circumstances permit as soon as feasibly possible. It is hard land to reclaim. These are bentonite outcrops. Mr. Lawson testified that oftentimes the grass really does not grow on those. They don't get grazed because there is no grass. But I believe Doug, Mr. Gibson, said that it's a pretty good area. There is some grass out there. And so there is a good chance that the reclamation will take better in this area, and that's certainly the hope. Mr. Thorson testified that we want to get on, and we want to get it done, and we want to get out, just as bad as Mr. Crossingham wants us out. And they have a contract on part of that amendment area that says we have to be out by April or May 2020. And that's their plan. Yes, they can mine a little bit longer on the other areas. But as far as the reclamation, we did hear plenty of testimony that it is, the overburden is placed back in the last bit. They're going to go in, they're going to make a cut, they're going to move the overburden, fill the last bit, and yes, they will reclaim it as they continue to proceed forward. They will start with the TTT-10. Is my time up? Okay. Very, very good. I will just say in closing, my last sentence or two is that there have been no complaints about reclamation to Black Hills. Yes, it's difficult, but they have tried to reclaim it, and our witnesses have testified, and even Mr. McGuire testified that yes, the land has been reclaimed, a lot of it. There is some that they're still mining on, which is not, but it will be reclaimed. Thank you very much.
Osterman, I'm sorry.
Maybe I should have Mr. Crossingham come up and give any closing remarks, but I would like to first thank all of you for your attention. I know you've been paying attention to all of the testimony and the exhibits that have been presented, so thank you very much. On behalf of the respondents, it's important, I think, that you come back to what I stated earlier. Pursuant to Wyoming Statute 35-11-406A subpart 2, a mining permit application shall contain a sworn statement that the applicant has the right and the power by legal estate owned to mine from the land for which the permit is desired. That is a statutory obligation. What has been admitted into evidence is the mine application for the HERCO amendment, which is TTT number 19. In this application, it is undisputed that the period for which they are seeking a mine application is beyond the time period for which they have the legal right to mine in the TTT number 10 claim. Given that fact, that undisputed fact, this application and therefore the mining plan and the reclamation plan, which are included in a part of this application, are void. It is not appropriate for this panel or this council to give order in lieu of consent for an application which on its face is void. There's not only the reason that this is fatally flawed with respect to the fact that it includes a time period for which it doesn't have the legal right, but there is also a legal dispute with respect to who has the legal right to mine within the Bobcat number 10 mining claim area. Given that there is a dispute as to that, this petition for order in lieu should not even consider the statutory elements in 406B subpart 12. However, then if the council decides that it does have the authority and that it does wish to consider those statutory factors, we believe that the undisputed evidence that was presented here today establishes that the petitioner has not satisfied elements B, C, and D. You've heard from multiple witnesses that the mining claim is not and does not provide the detail to establish the access in order to get to the HERCO amendment area. That mining plan simply says we have an easement within the HERCO amendment area, and that's not disputed. But what we know is that if they are going to access this from the north, that is not part of the mining plan. They didn't describe that. They give no explanation and no detail as to how that truck traffic or those operations can affect those portions of the ranch which are outside of the HERCO amendment area. What I'm hearing Black Hills Bentonnite say is that that's not part of the requirements. All we have to do is show you where it is that we enter into this HERCO amendment area, and we don't have to give you any more detail. We don't have to tell you how much dust is going to be caused by this. We don't have to tell you how much noise this truck traffic is going to make. We don't have to tell you whether or not there's going to be any air quality issues. We don't have to tell you whether or not there's going to be any water quality issues. That is the deficiencies that are absolutely apparent if you look at this mine and reclamation plan. Then I hear Mr. Ditto say today, well, we've given this entire binder with all of the maps and all of the detail with regards to this application to you in discovery. Well, that information was never given to the landowner before this petition was ever filed. The only thing that they provided was the mine and the reclamation plan. They didn't even provide the application. And the application shows that they tried to backdoor an additional 2 years beyond what they had the legal right to do in TTT number 10. That's the type of information that you cannot hide and should not be allowed by this council to say, well, we're going to ignore that, and you can sometime at a later point come and argue about those deficiencies. The fact of the matter is they did not provide the adequate information to allow Mr. Crossingham and the TTT ranch to determine whether, in fact, these operations would substantially affect their ranching operation. We've heard the testimony of how there are 3 streams that all run through this HERCO amendment area. We've heard testimony about Black Hills Bentonnite's past practices with respect to how they address potential damages to these water drainages, or how they, in fact, dump water that should never be put into these streams. That is the types of information that should have been provided about how they were going to protect these drainages from that type of behavior. How it is that they're going to protect these areas from cattle or other livestock getting into these mines, pits, to avoid the types of damages. In light of that, the court has to, or the panel should consider the fact that there is a dispute with regards to the application itself and the detail and the sufficiency of the mine plan and the reclamation plan. With respect to the access, we've heard lots of testimony here today saying that Black Hills Bentonnite has some historical access to this HERCO amendment area. There's no evidence that's before you to say just because you've used it means that you have the legal access to get to those locations. And I've heard Mr. Ditto say that it wasn't until a week ago that we first raised this issue of Black Hills Bentonnite using this private Wall Creek Road. And I would direct your attention to the exhibit number 11, the petition is exhibit number 11. It's a letter dated April 14th of 2016 from TTT Ranch to Mr. Thorson, which says in the very first sentence, as you know, the roads and surface lands in the area are private. It goes on to say TTT Ranch Company has never, in italics and underlined, granted permission to any of your employees to use private roads on our ranch or to enter on our private lands. This is not a new issue. This is in fact something that has been discussed amongst the parties. But the fact of the matter is the mine and the reclamation plan doesn't contain the detail that is required by the statute. With respect to the operations that are conducted out at the TTT Ranch, you heard the testimony of Mr. McGuire about the impacts based upon prior conduct of Black Hills Bentonnite with respect to their operations, whether it's the mine itself, the dust, the issues with regards to truck traffic, the issues with respect to how it impacts their water and drainages that livestock and other wildlife use in that area. And we also know that when it came to the question, I believe, Mr. Cora, you asked Mr. Thorson, tell us when it is that these operations can be conducted. How long is it going to take? And how long are these stockpiles going to remain out there? And what we've heard from even Mr. Thorson is he indicated that this could be done within a year, but the reclamation and the mining plan are entirely silent. They had nothing about that in either of those documents. And then with respect to the question of how long are these stockpiles going to remain out there, his answer was, I don't know. So we still don't have the detail. I would respectfully request that this council, for the basis that I've asserted in my opening and closing and based upon the evidence that's presented before you, that you would respectfully deny the petitioner's petition for order in lieu of surface owner consent. Thank you.
I want to clarify, make sure we're all on the same page as to the admitted exhibits before we close the evidentiary portion of the hearing. And correct me, Ryan, also correct me if I'm wrong. I have the cross-contempt exhibits are.
Excuse me, give me just a moment. I seem to have lost my blue page that had all my, it had a record of all my exhibits. That's got to be in here somewhere. Here we go. I'm sorry.
Okay, I just want to make sure we're all on the same page so that when we're looking at the evidence, we're all looking at the same things. Excuse me. So the crossing cam exhibits admitted are 1 through 14 and 19 through 20. But 15 through 18 were never. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct. That's my understanding. Thank you.
Okay. And then for Black Hills Bentonnite, I have admitted numbers 10 through 13, number 16, number 21, number 22, 25, 27 through 32, 34, 35, 37, and 39 through 42.
Let's see, I had 38 down here. Or maybe it's 39, no? Oh.
And not 39?
30,
Those
both,
are
yeah.
both? Okay.
Mhm.
Missed that one.
And did you say 32
and 42. 38 through 42.
I believe that's correct.
That's why I wanted to make sure.
It gets a little messy.
Mr. Crescent, you agree with those of you? I'm sorry, classroom.
Yes.
It's been a very long day.
Yes, I agree. Petitioners exhibits 10 through 13, 16, 21, 22, 25, 27 through 32, 34, 35, and I believe 37 through 42.
Right, you agree with that also? Okay, now then, these are the exhibits that we will take into consideration when we're making our decision. I'm going to go ahead and close the evidentiary portion of the hearing, and we will have a council debate and the council debate and decision at a further hearing, and we'll let you know when you're now meet.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
before we wrap up, can I just say a couple things to the parties to encourage them?
Sure.
Since Councilman Footner not here to do this, we prefer that parties sort these things out themselves, especially this order in lieu of consent. It's actually here in the law and it's there, so we deal with it when it comes forward. But to me, this often boils down to folks sitting down, and doesn't seem like we've done a lot of sitting down and talking about this between the parties. So a lot of evidence has been presented. I have, at this point, need time to really think about this evidence. I just assumed you guys, by the time we meet again, have sat down and talked about it and maybe come to some kind of agreement so that we don't even have to make this decision. It's always our preference as a council, that's the case. So I'd really like to encourage you to do that. To me, it sounds like it's boiling down to dollars. I mean, and so I don't want to know about your dollars, but sit down and talk whatever it takes to get this. Otherwise, we'll be back and we will give you a decision. But use this time to your advantage. Thank you, Manager.
Probably a decision that nobody will like. So, and the people that missed portions of the hearing, and also Mr. Flitner, will read the transcript or watch the video and catch up with what's going on, so that when we have our make our decision, everybody's up to speed. So I will ask for a motion to close the evidentiary portion of the hearing. Do I need to do that?
I don't think we need to do that.
I don't need to do that.
Okay. You can just recess the.
Okay, then I will recess this hearing, and we will let you know when we're going to reconvene to make a decision. But there will be no more arguments, no more evidence. This is the end of that portion.
Thank you.
Thanks.
You can have it.
I think.
Okay, so I have a motion to go into executive session for legal advice.